It's always good to see new competition emerge, especially in parts of the watch market where there's barely any. And in here, we've got a new contender in the digital space, or at least the Ana-digi space, and it's from Timex. Yeah, I saw this one on one of the marketing emails and instantly had to buy it because it really reminded me of one of my favorite Casio watches, only with higher end materials and better construction. And we'll see if the increased price versus some of those Casios is actually worth it. Now, there is one problem I foresaw from some of the photos, but I figured I'd buy one and we'll see if that's actually an issue in the flesh. Here we go. Okay, now first impressions, it's actually a little bit bigger than I expected this. It's not huge by any stretch, but it's certainly a bit larger than some of the Casios. And here it is, the new Timex 1982 Ana-digi Reissue. Now in that product title, they say it's also 33 millimeters, and maybe it is technically 33 wide. Certainly looks a lot larger than a 33mm watch though. For context, here is the Casio AQ-230, which is the watch that this one immediately reminded me of. It's another Ana-digi watch, and as you can see, it is quite substantially larger than that. We'll get the exact measurements in a second. And my first impressions are, I do quite like the styling of this one, but there's one thing I'm really not sure about, and it is the hands there. So I think for the most part, it is fairly attractive, but those hands are really short. Now, obviously, those hands, given the stretched out size of the analog portion, they're supposed to really be sized in accordance with the two closest parts, which is the top and the bottom. But I can't help but notice that hour hand, even if it's as close to the top as possible, yeah, it's... Oh, I guess it does just about touch. Maybe that's why they've done that. You see, in other sections, when you adjust it to like the more standard 10 past 10 position, you'll see it ends up just inherently falling short of some of these markers, especially these ones in the corner. But yeah, maybe that isn't quite as bad as I thought. I can kind of see why they did that now when you go up close like that. But yeah, this model has got some unusual properties. One being the crown here. So it's got the addition of like a standardized crown for the bottom half, which I thought was quite interesting. And that makes time adjustments easier, well, more than anything, easier to remember, because that's the only thing with watches like the old AQ-230. It's got no crown. I always forget how to use this thing, especially when you're bobbing between tons of different watches, when each watch has its own specific functions and combinations of button presses. I just find myself forgetting them all the time. Whereas at least for this bottom section, that's easy to accomplish, isn't it? You can just use the crown and adjust it like a typical watch. So really like that addition. Doesn't mean it's the most symmetrical, but I still think it's a bonus. And given that this is an Ana-digi watch, you can see you can have a separate time in the top center compared to on the analog portion. So you can monitor a second time zone if you want. Not exactly sure how that bit operates. If I press that, oh, this is the mode change here. And there we go, we can start stop. Looks like we've got a timer there, got alarms, and then a chime function from the looks of this, CHM. Quite unusual that. This is, supposedly stainless steel case. Let me just double check on the site a minute. Yeah, they are claiming on the site here that it is stainless steel, which I guess is partly evident from the fact that this bit has some brushing on. It's quite fine brushing, which you can normally only achieve with stainless steel. The only thing that made me doubt it for a second was actually the flanks here. Flanks are very shiny and really quite smooth and rounded off, a bit like some of the resin watches, which makes me think maybe this is like a slightly different grade of stainless steel, not the typical 316L. Can't confirm for sure because they don't state it and there's no real way of testing it, but it looks and feels a lot like some of the 304 steel watches that I've covered before. A bit like what Vostok uses. It looks a lot like that. So I suspect that's maybe what they've gone for here. I have to admit, I don't think the case feels quite as well made as some of the Casio stainless steel cases, but it is thinner than some of those. I think the dial arguably looks better. Now on the website, these look pretty much black actually. Yeah, not sure you can quite see there because of my filter, but on the site, it's almost black, whereas in reality, it's more like a medium to dark grey. So not quite what I was after. I feel like this watch would have looked better if this was completely black. Legibility seems okay though, nonetheless. I will give this a low light test just to see if there's any sort of luminescence on this. There might well be. Now, I did buy this one with my own money, albeit with a discount code from Timex, but it's currently selling on the Timex website for £155 as the standard price. So that's about, what, 170, $180 US. Apparently the crystal on there is just a mineral crystal, looks fairly flat, and it's only got a mere 30 meters of water resistance, unfortunately. With the case back here that does look an awful lot like some of the Casio watches, with the screws just in each corner. It keeps the rear nice and flat, but you know, it does come at the cost of that water resistance, which is a shame. Bracelet is maybe a bit better than most Casios though. It is still some form of folded link. This looks a lot like what came on the Q Timex. Looks great from the outside, and also it doesn't feel like there's many openings for your hairs to get in. These links are very tightly packed together, and yeah, I'm really not feeling any pinching on my skin at least, so it might not be quite as bad as it looks. Also, I've noticed with these slide clamp mechanisms like this, the smaller the links in the watch, the more adjustment range you get with these, because with some of the other ones like the Casio bracelets, you can only really adjust these in link-sized increments, because otherwise the flap doesn't seal down. So I imagine you'll probably get a better fit with this one too. Guess we'll experiment with that in a second. Give you a close-up of this one first. Overall, I think it's quite stylish, and I actually rather like the inclusion of the gold Q at the top center. I had a look at the original version of this watch, and there are some significant changes. Not sure which one I prefer. I think if this one were a genuine fully black dial, I'd probably go with this one, but the other one does have some quirks. I imagine the old one's probably made of worse materials, but maybe it looks better. Viewing angles seem fairly decent on the digital portion, even if it is very thin there. Just wondering if there was any indiglow on that section, but I can't see any. And then here's a look at case finishing. You can see what I mean here on the sides. Just looks a little bit like some of the resin watches, you know, like the chromed watches. Doesn't look the best from side on. Looks alright from above. And the bracelet's relatively well integrated. It's okay. The bracelet does suit the style of the watch. And here's how it compares to the AQ-230, which is the most similar watch I can think of. Obviously, significantly bigger, and it's also a tiny bit chunkier too. So if some of these smaller Casios were too small for you, I guess this could be one option. But yeah, let's get some exact measurements and then we'll give this a try on. So width-wise, not including any of the pushers, it is, yeah, just shy of 33 mil. Lug to lug length is pretty easy to get on this one. It's about 40.5 and a thickness of 8.8. Really not sure how this one's going to look on me. Could end up being a little bit large actually for my wrist, even though it's only 33 mil. Quick go with this bracelet system. So this is the easiest way I've found to do it. Just pop a screwdriver in there. Yeah, this is definitely going to adjust better than most. There we go, let's experiment with that. Maybe that's about right. Maybe it needs to be a fraction tighter. So it's official, you can get the perfect fit with this watch. And there's a look at it on my 6¼ inch wrist. Definitely wears a lot bigger than the likes of the AQ-230 or some of the other Casio models, or at least it's like higher than them. The width across here is similar enough, but has a whole lot more wrist presence overall. Wears much more like something like the Casio Royale, you know, that really popular model. The bracelet isn't half bad actually, not feeling any signs of pinching, so whatever they've been doing with that, it's worked to some degree. It actually suits my style pretty well. Again, my hoodie here seems to suit the gold Q at the top center. It does look quite good, this one. Normally the digital portion sits at the bottom, whereas this time it's kind of sitting at the top. Looks a bit like Jimmy Neutron in a way, with like the brains up at the top. Almost like it's got a large forehead, but yeah, not really a great deal of overhang here. Now, I've never been one for smartwatches, but this kind of fits like a smartwatch from the looks of this. Boxy square profile. Overall not bad, but definitely not the sleekest watch. I think from square on it's quite handsome. Could well be the biggest 33mm watch I've ever tried though. I mean, my wrists are small just because of the shape more than anything else. Overall though, it is quite attractive. I think some will be put off by the price though. 155 is maybe a little bit much for a watch like this. I think just due to Casio's prominence in the market at lower prices, I might just be hesitant to pay that for this sort of watch, even if it is substantially better built. The texture just seems to be fairly flat and plain there, but I do like the fact that the analog portion is inset somewhat. It prevents it from looking too basic. I also noticed when trying this on that the bracelet kind of retains its shape a little bit, got a slight stiffness to it. I think maybe it's that lack of floppiness that helps prevent it from pinching too much. But let's give this a low light test, just curious to see if it's got anything going on there at all. And to be honest, I wasn't seeing anything then, but no, it does look like we've got something there. This may be a matter of how long does it last in milliseconds rather than seconds. Let's switch that off. Yeah, that's died almost instantly. Yeah, that's basically a non-feature. Let's just see, there's definitely no backlight, is there, on this? No. No sign of any Indiglo, sadly. I feel like this is a watch where Indiglo would have been perfect. So yeah, I feel like they were quite close with this one, Timex. I don't think this is quite as much of a home run as a couple of the previous releases. Just feels like there's one or two things that aren't quite right. Now, the hands aren't actually as much of an issue as I expected, but some sort of low light performance would have been good, and also more water resistance probably would have been appreciated, especially considering it costs a fair whack more than some of the other competition digitals or Ana-digis. But either way, it is new competition in this space, and competition is always good.